skies will be filled with the greatest air armada the world has ever seen. Our own Army Air Forces, the best planes ever built, 65,000 planes this year. And by the time you finish your training, America will have overwhelming superiority in the air.
When I was 18 years old, I went to my enlisted basic training, and that was quite a while ago. I won't tell you what year it is. But we had a guy in our squad that was 28 years old. He was married, had 2 kids. We called him Pappy. Pappy Boynton, World War II, VMF 214, the Black Sheep Squadron. He was in his 30s. There you go. Pappy Gunn was 42 years old when World War II started. 42 years old. Okay, that is a picture of him, one of the only of 2 pictures of him in a dress uniform. And I'll explain it later on as I go through the briefing here. But I'm going to talk about his biography before World War II, the World War II situation, his affiliation with the Far East Air Force and the 5th Air Force, his innovations that he implemented, 2 missions in particular, the Royce mission and the Battle of the Bismarck Sea I'll be talking about, and the results of those battles, and also the Philippines liberation, and then post-World War II. A little orientation to the area of operations. This is the Southwest Pacific. This is McArthur's theater of operations that included the Australia, Papua New Guinea, a little bit of the Solomon Islands on the east side, the Dutch East Indies with Java and Borneo, and then the Philippines. Pappy was born in 1899 in Arkansas. His name was Paul Irvin Gunn. He was known as Paul or P.I. or Irvin. As a teenager, he was just fascinated with engineering and with fixing things, and also with airplanes. He wanted to be a pilot. But he got in trouble when he was about 16, 17 years old. He was actually running moonshine, and he got caught. Well, you either go to jail or you go in the service. And he went in the service and he enlisted in the United States Navy, became an aviation machinist mate. He did on his own time and his own money, got a private pilot's license, and he bought a surplus Navy F-1 float plane and restored it with a friend of his, and this is a picture of it. And you can see it's pretty bare bones at that time, being the early 1920s, not much to the aircraft at all. They improved, of course, over time with design. He met Clara Louise Crosby in 1921 and got married. He called her Polly, and I don't know why, but her name was Polly, and that's all he referred to as Polly. And that's a wedding picture of them. And they proceeded to start a family. They have 2 kids, 2 girls rather, and then 2 sons. As of last night, I was searching the obituaries. I could not find an obituary for his youngest son. As far as I know, he's still alive, and he'd be 95 years old this year. And he was an author in his career, but he is still alive as far as I know. In 1923, he was offered an incentive to re-enlist, and he went to pilot training and became a pilot by the spring of 1925, a naval aviation pilot. And he flew from some of the Navy's first carriers, the Saratoga, the Landley, and the Lexington. He also was a float plane pilot, and he flew quite a few missions on float planes in the Caribbean on Navy cruisers. On the variety of planes that he did fly, and I just have a few of them here that he would fly, and these are some of the fighter planes that he would have flown at the time, a Boeing manufacturer, Vought and Curtiss, and these are some of the float planes that he would have flown during his career. He also participated in his training going after ships at sea, and this comes in very important during World War II, and you'll see that when we get to that point. But he also was a part of a redesign team as a volunteer with enlisted and pilots to adjust the catapult systems on ships, Navy ships. Now, this is an up-to-date catapult system. This picture is from our model of the USS Arizona in the east part of the pavilion, so you want to go over and take a look at it. And he tested sitting in the aircraft being catapulted off of the rail into flight. Well, they used a charging system, an explosion cartridge system, and he got accelerated a little bit too fast, and he got a double hernia from the event. And of course, he had to have surgery, but he also got injured on the recovery crane that was in the back of the aircraft. So he helped improve some of the procedures for bringing those on, the planes on board. And this is, eventually the catapult system was a steam-operated system to launch the aircraft. And this is from a cruiser from 1943 on what it looked like, and he would have flown off of some of these in his earlier days. He was stationed at various locations around the United States, basic training, Naval Air Station in New Jersey, Pensacola, where he was an instructor pilot, and of course he went to school there for pilot training. And he taught many of the soon-to-be World War II and Naval and Marine Corps aviators. He was also at Naval Station Anacostia in Washington, D.C., where he became a VIP pilot. He had to be pretty good to be chosen for this program. And then San Diego and California. And then overseas, he was in Hawaii. These were his last assignments on carriers. And he was a member of the Flying Chiefs and the Top Hatters, and those were fighter squadrons. The VF in Navy terminology is fighter squadron. And he was also the commander of VJ-7 out of Hawaii. And VJ stood for, a Navy designation is for observation or reconnaissance squadron. 1937, when Amelia Earhart went down in the ocean in the Pacific, he was part of that search, and he flew off the USS Lexington. And of course, they did not find her, but the Navy was out there for quite a while, through into the about mid-July 1937, and they covered an area of about 600 to 400 miles square looking for her, and they never found her. And then retirement comes along as a Chief Petty Officer in 1939. He became acquainted with the owner of the KT Inter-Island Service, and he did part-time work while he was still on active duty, but he went to work with them when he retired. And they did sightseeing flights and charter flights, and he was the superintendent of maintenance. There's a picture of him at one of their aircraft. He was also a test pilot, a charter pilot, and an instructor pilot. Then later on, very soon after that, he did run into the owners of the Philippine Airlines. And in 1939, he was offered a position as the main pilot and operations manager. And he moved his family to Manila, the Philippines. It was pretty good at that time. They had a great place in Manila that they lived in. This is the Beech 18s that they had. This is a picture of a Beech 18 from the Philippine Airlines. They had 4 of them. And they also had a Beech 17, which was a stagger wing aircraft. And this is a picture of the hangar, and that's the stagger wing. But this is what it looks like when it comes out of the hangar. And that's a modern day picture, but that is the aircraft. That is a Beech 17. He became very familiar with the airfields all over the islands, knew them by heart. You could navigate without a map. But then the war clouds were starting to form. The Japanese were starting to expand, and they had some very specific objectives and attack plans. Avoid war with the Soviet Union, win the war with China and isolate them, go after natural resources, the tin, oil, and rubber in the Dutch East Indies, cut off the Philippines' line of communications, isolate that island chain, establish a good defense perimeter around the Pacific for their empire, and then, of course, destroy and neutralize the U.S. Pacific Fleet and attack the Philippines' U.S. forces. Far East Air Force at the time of the attack, not soon after the December 7 attack at Pearl Harbor, Luzon was attacked. And about 84% of their bombers were destroyed, 60% of their P-40s, a small percentage of their P-35s, which wasn't much of a fighter plane at the time, and then their utility aircraft, almost 70% of their planes were gone. But their facilities were severely damaged. I mean, they lost runway capability, support trucks, warehouses, parts, pieces. Of course, you had the loss of lives, many loss of lives in those airfields when the Japanese attacked. The Far East Air Force, needless to say, was definitely in a disarray. Lieutenant General Brett, he was the Far East commander. He confiscates the Philippine Airlines. He needs some help moving around the islands, getting staff around in and out of the islands, and he brings the Philippine Airlines in. They are known as the the Bamboo Air Force. And of course, Pappy Gunn gets caught up in all of this, and he's offered a commission as a captain in the U.S. Army Air Corps. Along with some of the other Philippine Airlines pilots, they came in as lieutenants, and then some of the mechanics came in as senior sergeants. But they were offering and providing shuttling service to senior staff throughout Australia, down to Melbourne in Australia and back and forth, and also supply missions on the islands. Pappy, of course, was very concerned. His family was in Manila. Manila was being attacked. There were several airfields around Manila, and he moved them to several safer locations. And he was always in the back of his mind, I've got to get my family out of the Philippines. That was very prominent in his mind, and he was very angry that he had to leave them there, and they were detained. And I'll point that out in a moment here. He desperately tried to, in between supply missions, to get them to safety. But there was a story that had to be told, and Polly came up with this story. There were no paper orders for his captain's commission. It was a vocal order of the commanding officer, on or about the 15th of December, 1941. Well, what does that mean? Well, there's no information in their apartment or in their home that has any connection with him being in the U.S. Army Air Corps. The story is he was killed in the December 10th attack on the Cavite Navy base, Navy Yard in Manila. He's gone. Polly looked at the kids. Your dad's gone. He was killed on 10 December 1941. Stick to it. It's going to save our lives. And it did. Stick to it. There's no connection to the current situation. They had films around, family films. They had pictures. They had everything that was related to the Navy and nothing to the Army Air Force. But Pappy was going to get them out somehow, and then he was ordered to Australia. And of course, Japan rapidly advances through the area. You can see from the red arrows there all the landings from December 10th to the 30th of the month. And then, of course, Manila, with his family in Manila, they are detained on January 2nd. And he does find out that they're safe, but detained. And he is very upset that he's got to get them out somehow. What is he going to do? This is the University of Santos Thomas. This is where they were detained. That's a picture of it. This picture is actually from 1932, but there wasn't much change between 32 and 1941. Probably a few other outbuildings were for the campus and the university purpose. But this is some of the living conditions early on, and they got worse over time. And this was a picture of the men's dorm in an auditorium on the campus. The women were off in side rooms and smaller rooms to stay away from the men. So they were somewhat secure, but they were under a lot of scrutiny at the beginning, and the Japanese made it worse as time went on. But it was 3 years that they were detained. And Pappy did find out that they were detained and they were safe, but he wanted to get them out desperately. This is a picture of Quezon Boulevard near the campus. Pappy had made connections with some Filipino friends to pull them out of the university and meet him at the end of the street on this boulevard. He was going to land his Beech 18 on that boulevard, park at the end and wait, and then get him out of there. Well, he did do that. They didn't show up. Well, he had to leave, so he left. So that was his opportunity to get him out, and he just couldn't do it. This boulevard actually was used when the other airfields around Manila were so badly damaged from Japanese attacks that P-40s were landing on this strip right here to go up and meet the Japanese when they could, and that didn't last for very long. Okay, and then FDR sends a message to McArthur. Leave and proceed to Mindanao. From Mindanao, you're going to go to Australia, where you're going to assume command of the U.S. Army forces in Australia. But you are authorized to take your chief of staff, General Sutherland. We'll talk about him a little bit more. And of course, some other staff officers with him. But get out, get to Australia. And he arrives in Australia around the 17th of March. Fall of Bataan, 9th of April, 1942, and then Corregidor finally, the final surrender in 6th of May, 1942. The defense situation in Australia, Darwin is attacked on the 19th of February and also on the 14th of March, and it was pretty bad. And during that time, the Japanese are feared that they're going to land somewhere in Australia, but Australia wants to start moving south their defensive lines and get further away just in case the Japanese do attack. MacArthur's not having any talk of it. He arrives on the 17th of March. As he's arriving and getting on a plane to get to a rail station, the Japanese are attacking on the 17th of March, but he makes it to Melbourne to reorganize. Then Pappy Gunn arrives in January 42 in Australia. He is placed in command of what's called the Far East Air Force Transport Command. And it's out of Townsville Airfield, Charter Towers Airfield in Townsville, where the arrow indicates. He also worked out of Darwin and Brisbane. He had a variety of missions. He flew a variety of aircraft. He had Beech 18s, he had P-40s, C-47s, and A-20s at the time. That were kind of a mismatch of airplanes in the inventory here to fight back. He also was a part of some operations in Java and the Dutch East Indies. He flew a variety of aircraft on attacks that were undocumented. He also acquired a B-17 that he found off on the side of an airfield, and it was called Miss EMF. E stood for every, M morning, F fixin'. It was a broke airplane, and he put it together, and he actually used it on some attacks. He had loaded it up, grabbed the crew together, put bombs in the bomb bay, and went after Japanese planes that they knew about that were in the area. He also was working on an invention of his that to put guns, machine guns, in the nose of these A-20s, M2s, which were 50 caliber machine guns. And he used the M2s that were in damaged and unflyable airplanes to pull them into what he was doing. And of course, he added them in the nose, give him more firepower for strafing runs on the enemy. He was unofficially attached to the 3rd Bombardment or Attack Group in April 42, but he flew a lot of missions with them, and when he's not transporting, he's doing a lot of transport, he's looking for parts. He's very busy. He's a workaholic is what he is when he's in the field. Mainly out of the Charter Towers field, he managed those repair facilities, and he's trying to assemble a group of A-24s. The A-24 is actually the Army version of the Dauntless, and we have a Dauntless in the pavilion hangar. It was the Army version. They were crated up, shipped to the Philippines, but of course they diverted when the attack started on December 8th, and sent to Australia. Well, they didn't have parts. They had wrecked crates. The engines weren't tuned. There was no documentation. They didn't really know what to do with them, and they tried desperately to put those things together. But he is working on the A-20s, and he does have some B-25 innovations with the nose guns, multiple guns in the nose. He actually figures out a way to put guns pointing straight down out of the bomb bay, firing down from the pilot's position to go over enemy troop concentration and mow them down as he's flying over them. Well, that didn't work out real well, but he did try it. He used 30 caliber machine guns for that, but it just didn't work out. But he was one for trying just about anything to make anything work. But there was an opportunity that presented itself on one of his trips. He was looking around for parts, and he was in Melbourne in the south, and he happened to see 24 beautiful B-25s that were parked on the side of the runway. And he thought, where in the heck are these? Whose are those? Well, let's get them. Well, he told his commanding officer, Lieutenant Colonel Davies, he found out that they were allocated to the Dutch. And the U.S. they were expecting some deliveries of the B-25s to replenish their inventory to fight back, but the Dutch didn't have any trained crews or pilots. They had one pilot, I think. They had no spare parts. They had some parts, but they didn't know where they were and what they were used for, but they had no missions and no way to fight back. Well, we could use those in the U.S. Army Air Force. And he said, Who's to say those Mitchells aren't ours? Well, what are we going to do here? Well, he spots them in Melbourne, and he's leaving and returning to Townsville, and he has to refuel in Brisbane. Well, what he does, he gets a C-47, he gets himself and 22 other pilots along with Davies. They fly down to Melbourne, refueling at Brisbane, and they are aided by a vaguely worded order from General Eubanks. He is the 5th Bomber Command commander. But he's got this piece of paper, it's an official written order. Well, they're approached by the military police when they're flying from Melbourne back to Townsville, and they're refueling. They're approached by the U.S. military's MPs, military police, and the base commander, who was a major at the time. Pappy Gunn is confronting him and saying, look, I have a paper order here. It's official. And the major argued with him, and he argued back. He says, your verbal order doesn't match and overpower my written order. So finally he said, okay, fine, let's go. Well, needless to say, American and Dutch ambassadors and representatives up the chain get really harassed for this. Nobody loses their job, but it's a lot of painful conversation going on. But when he got back to Townsville, he realized that the Norden bomb sites that should have been in the nose of the B-25s were not there. Well, he's kind of like, okay, get me another plane. I'm going back down there to get them. Well, he gets in a C-47, flies back down to Melbourne to secure them, and he confronts a Dutch supply officer, and he is known for pulling out 45 caliber pistols and threatening supply officers, either Dutch or Royal Australian supply officers, to get parts and pieces that he needs to do his job. Well, the Dutch officer recognized him. Okay, finally, so he got his staff to load the airplane. So he got his Norden bomb sites for the B-25s. And you could say that he acquisitioned those planes. He really didn't steal them. That was a point of controversy for quite a while. But he's getting these B-25s ready for combat. He's got his staff working on them. He's got 24 beautiful B-25s getting ready for combat. Then on the 6th of April, he gets a notice, a demand order, get your body down to Melbourne with Lieutenant Colonel Davies. We need to talk to you. And he thought for sure, I'm going to be court-martialed. I'm done for the day. Well, it turns out that there was a top secret briefing on a mission that was going to be conducted on the 11th of April. It would be known as the Royce mission, and it was going to be done, and they were going to be a part of it. The Royce mission, it was a aerial counteroffensive against Japanese forces. It was led by Brigadier General Ralph Royce. And it was originally ordered by Wainwright, who had surrendered on Corregidor later on after this, actually. And keep in mind, this is before the Corregidor surrender, so this is just after Bataan fell, the peninsula fell. And their mission is to establish a support base at Del Monte Field on Mindanao Island. Here you can see the arrow pointing to Mindanao Field at Del Monte, on or about 11th of April. 3 B-17s would attack, and 10 B-25s would attack Japanese shipping and forward bases in the Philippines. The B-25s would go after Cebu and Mount Mindanao targets, and the B-17s would hit the Luzon targets. Disperse those planes as necessary for safety on these two airfields, Valencia and Maramag, and they were just south of Del Monte Field on Mindanao. In fact, the Japanese weren't aware of these two fields that they could work from. And Pappy Gunn did participate in the attacks and provided the expertise for any repairs, extended fuel capability to go back and forth from Australia. And he was actually the last plane out after the mission, carrying whoever he needed to carry back to the Darwin. But this is the roster for the mission, 10 B-25s and 3 B-17s. And these pictures are actually from Mindanao and Del Monte Field. And you can see circled there, you have Captain Gunn and his co-pilot, Lieutenant Bender. In the upper right-hand picture, you can see the serial number of the aircraft that he's flying. And these pictures were taken on Mindanao. But the attack went like this. On Gunn's first mission over Cebu, a large freighter evaded his bombs. Incensed, he instinctively plunged into a steep dive. Memories of Gunn's Navy days went ricocheting through his mind. The arcane knowledge that ships' guns automatically stop firing when lowered below 18 degrees to keep them from blowing themselves out of their mounts. A pilot flying low enough could get unbelievably close if he dared to. He also flashed on the lucrative pots awarded to pilots who could skip a bomb across the water the most times during a dive bombing training. Gunn ordered the turret gunners and bombardier to fire their 50 caliber machine guns forward. He'd release the bombs. "We're going in low," Gunn told them, "so low you think you're swimming." Within seconds, the B-25 was 100 feet off the waves, guns blazing, screaming straight for the ship's bridge. Squeezing the trigger and squirming in the plexiglass nose, Gunn's bombardier pleaded with him to pull up, but Gunn had tunnel vision. Spray the deck," he yelled over the intercom before releasing two 500-pound bombs and yanking back on the yoke. One bomb convulsed the ship in fiery explosions. G-forces pinned Gunn to his seat but could not restrain his emotions. "That's the way to do it, boys," he yells as he whipped the B-25 into a crisp 180-degree turn for another run at the enemy. "That's the way to get him." "Yeah, that's the way," huffed Gunn's hyperventilating co-pilot, Lieutenant Bender. "If you want to get us all killed, that's the way." Flush with adrenaline, Gunn dove again, resulting in catastrophic hits with 500-pounders that skipped across the surface to slam into the ship at the waterline, shearing it in half. Soon the other B-25 pilots emulated Gunn. The raid stunningly successful. 10 B-25s hit Davao in the morning, 4 more in the evening, and 4 bombers pounced on Cebu. Despite anti-aircraft fire and fire from Zeros and seaplanes, the strafing B-25s stitched warehouses, docks, fuel dumps, mowing down men, and sparking huge fires. The results: Nichols Field near Manila, one hangar and runways are damaged. Heavy damage to port docks on Luzon, 1 freighter is sunk. On Davao, on Mindanao, 1 bomber is destroyed, several damaged, 2 transports are hit, 2 seaplanes damaged, 1 was shot down. Troop concentrations were dispersed, docks and warehouses damaged. And on Cebu, 3 transports are sunk, several damaged, 3 planes shot down, and several on the ground damaged, with damaged docks at their port area. And then a return back to Darwin when it was over. It was a special mission complete on the 14th of April. All the crews returned. They lost 1 airplane, 1 B-17 was damaged, they couldn't repair. It was an aerial counter-offensive success. But a few days later, on the 18th of April, Doolittle attacked Japan. Well, guess who got the press? Doolittle. But that is a picture of the Royce mission participants. I looked through that picture real closely with a magnifying glass. I could not see Pappy Gunn's picture in there. I think he really avoided any press as possible to keep his family safe while they were imprisoned and detained. A little review of the Far East Air Force and the organization. It was organized for the Philippines prior to World War II and included the Philippine Air Corps. It was formed on 16 November 1941 and then reconstituted as the 5th Air Force in February 42. And this is the predecessor to today's United States Air Force, 5th Air Force. MacArthur was very satisfied with his commander. It was Lieutenant General George Brett. And his replacement was recommended Major General Kenney, appointed by General Arnold, who was the Chief of Staff in Washington, D.C. And Kenney took over in July of 42. And then later on, and this is further ahead in 1944, the Far East Air Force was reconstituted, relaunched, and included the 5th, 7th, and 13th Air Forces. So that's just a little history on the 5th Air Force and where it came from and where it went. Brett is relieved by General Kenney in July of 42. He takes over the 5th Air Force, and there's a picture of him with General McArthur. But he has a little bit of problem with General Sutherland, who was the Chief of Staff for MacArthur. He kind of holds him off and prevents him from going in to talk with MacArthur about air operations. And Sutherland got very used to telling General Brett where to go with air operations and actually issued orders. Well, Sutherland was commissioned an artillery officer in World War I. He taught at the infantry school and part of his career in the wars. But he didn't get a civil license until 1940-41, which I guess he thinks he was qualified to do air operations and conduct air operations. Kenny wasn't having any bit of it. He couldn't get past him to go see McArthur about air operations, what he needed to do. So what he did was he told him, I know what reconnaissance is about, control of the air, strike, mobility, and then how to implement innovations. What he did was he took a 8.5 by 11 piece of paper from his desk, put a dot in the middle of it, and said, that dot is what you know about air operations. That white area is what I know. Slammed the paper on his desk. He never had a problem with them after that. He could get in and see McArthur whenever he wanted to. Okay, so General Kenney has got to tour his bases. What does he have for him? What does he got for fighting power here? One of his stops is at the Charter Towers Field at Townsville, where he meets now Major Pappy Gunn. This is an aerial shot of the airfield at Charter Towers. It's a pretty big facility, a lot of hangars, a lot of access to runways and so on. This is another shot of one of the repair hangars on the base. But he's very impressed with what he's doing as far as putting guns in the A-20s, the nose of the A-20s, and some of the other things he was working on. But the gunships, the guns in the nose was very impressive. He made it work. He rebalanced the weight in the aircraft, and that worked out pretty good. But he was also working on the B-25s. But Kenney assigns him as the general, his special projects officer, and he's known throughout the theater as the general's uninhibited engineer and the mad professor. He'd come up with all kinds of ideas, try to implement them. If they worked, they went forward, and he directed everybody what to do and how to get things done. But he was already modifying the A-20s with the nose guns, and he was starting to work on the B-25s. But he used those, what he called the strafers, in late August of 42 on Lae, an airfield facility in New Guinea, and attacked Japanese forces with those guns in the nose. As the special projects officer, he directed a lot more modifications, get to work. Oh, by the way, I need 16 A-20s with parafrag bomb racks for missions. Parafragmentation bombs was a General Kenney invention between the wars. And what it was a parachute on the end of a fragmentation bomb that slowed down, that allowed the airplane to get away from the explosion to attack an airfield at low level. And the first time that was used from the modifications that Pappy Gunn did was on the 12th of September at the Boona Airfield in New Guinea. This is a close-up shot of 3 of the bombs that have been released. You see it's about to hit a Japanese plane on the ramp. This is what it looked like. You had the fuse with the arming vein in the front. You had the TNT material. And if you look real closely, I think you can see it on this. You see the lines where the TNT is. That's obviously designed to fragment and spread a lot of hot metal around to destroy things on the ground. You see the lanyard to pull the arming vein on the fuse, and of course the parachute in the back. And this is what it looks like deployed. Pretty simple. Also, what Pappy did was created bomb chutes that he could put in. They were module bomb chutes for the A-20s and the B-25s. And as you can see, he's got 2 pieces here with 20 racks apiece. So you've got 40 fragmentation bombs he can put in the bomb bay area to drop on the target. Okay, as the special projects officer, get to work. You have carte blanche, open checkbook. Don't worry about anything. I got you covered. Oh, by the way, add a squadron of B-25s with bomb rack parafrags and test them on this aircraft here. He called it Pappy's Folly. And of course, he had the modifications in the front, and of course, he had what were called the cheek guns or package guns on the side that he worked out. He was working out of Brisbane and Townsville, And this is the picture on the right are the B-25s that have been modified, and they're attacking the Japanese airfield at first with the nose guns and then with the parafrag bombs. Pappy Gunn the man, he was a junkyard genius, could do anything. He could figure anything out and solve it. He used to fly around in a B-25 that he nicknamed, or his nose art name was Not in Stock. And if you look at the picture, that is the only picture of him that I could find of him in the Not in Stock airplane, but you can see the letter K at the end. That's not in stock. He'd go out and look for parts and pieces, and that was his transport that he used to fly around in. He told tall tales of his experience when he was in the Navy to all the young aviators that were out there. One story was that he had a mission out in the Caribbean. His engine stopped. Well, what are you going to do when your engine stops? He's looking for a nice place to land on the water with a float plane. He finds a spot and realizes that he's landed on a whale. I have no idea if it was really true, but that was the story he told the aviators. Well, the whale let me fix my airplane and let me get in, and actually he assisted me taking off on a nice wave. And he was off doing his thing. But that's one of the stories. There were several others that were out there. He would explain in detail evading Jap fighter planes. He was shot down twice in his B-18s, or Beech 18s. Once in January and another in March of '42. And he survived. I mean, he got peppered pretty good from the Japanese planes. He was wounded at least 9 times, 9 Purple Hearts. This is a picture of him outside. It looks like an officers' club. They have drinks. The other 2 guys have drinks in their hands. And you can see the bandage on his right hand. He injured himself working on some of the aircraft, and he actually broke it. And it was dangling down. Well, the doctor fixed it up and taped it. Well, he broke it again, and he broke it again. And he said, Doc, will you take this thing off? I don't need it. He said, just don't do that. Let it heal. He says, you're going to take it off, or I'm going to shoot it off. Well, he has his 45 with him. He chambers around. The doc says, oh, stop. I'll take it off. And he did. And that's what it looks like. After the surgery, but he's missing his little finger on his right hand. What he does do is train and teach tactics, and one of them is skip bombing, and this is a picture of a B-20, I think that's a B-25, practicing on a wrecked ship. And this is one actually delivering 2 bombs on the water, a B-25. He also taught what was referred to as masked bombing tactics. And this was coming in astern on a ship and dropping in the bombs on the deck. Very effective. And he kind of practiced that actually during the Royce mission. Battle of the Bismarck Sea from the 2nd to the 4th of March 1943. Reconnaissance from the 5th Air Force indicated a buildup of ships and looked like a lot of supplies and troops around Rabaul on New Britain. This is Pappy Gunn here with one of his colleagues on the airfield, but his tactics and modifications would be used during that attack very effectively. But Lieutenant General Kenney started ordering him to not go on combat missions. He was too valuable as an innovator to get things done. You're not going on combat missions. Well, I tell you right now, he went on combat missions to test things, and somehow he found enemy planes and troops to go after, and he would do it. And of course, Kenney would pull him aside, and they'd have a little dock. But actually, Gunn was on a B-17 observing the attacks for the Battle of Bismarck Sea. This is a map of the battlefield area. Here you have the buildup at Rabaul. The convoy was about here on the 2nd of March, and they were going to reinforce the Japanese garrisons at Leh. And of course, they were watching, 5th Air Force was watching them the whole time. They deployed their aircraft, and they attacked on the 3rd and the 4th of March. Pretty devastating. Allied fighters for air cover. The nose guns in those ships and those airplanes were just devastating in blowing the defensive positions on the destroyers and the ships away. It devastated their defenses. Also, the skip bombing was very, very effective. The results, with the combinations of all those airplanes strafing and bombing, skip bombing the enemy ships. Japanese losses were 8 troop transports were sunk, 4 of 8 destroyers were sunk, 3,000 Japanese were killed, 900 of the 7,000 that were supposed to reach New Guinea only made it, 900. A lot of them that survived did make it back to Rabaul some way. They floated back on whatever they had from the ships being destroyed. U.S. losses, or Allied losses rather, 13 aircrew were killed, 12 were wounded. We lost 4 planes, 3 P-38s, 1 B-17, and 2 aircraft crash landed on returning to base. The unintended consequences here on Good Enough Island, and I don't know where Good Enough Island is, I don't know what makes it good enough, but it was off New Guinea on the east, and this was after the attacks, and Australian troops killed 72 Japanese that were from that attack, captured 42 and found 9 others dead. Another raft, they killed 9 more, and they found some tins, sealed tins on that raft. They were documents showing every assignment of the Japanese officers in the Japanese Army, where they were located, ranks, names, the whole works. The intended consequences, and this comes from the U.S. Strategic Bombing Survey post-World War II regarding the Southwest Pacific. Quote, from March 1943 to the end of the war, the enemy remained on the defensive strategically and tactically, except for desperate counterattacks by separate and isolated units. And you can see some of the damage below, but it turned the tide of the Southwest Pacific for the Japanese. They never were able to respond very well. This is showing what the trained and learned tactics were, the nose gun strafer attacks on the ships, skip and mass bombing from another aircraft hitting from the stern, and also hitting airfields and bases with the nose guns and the parafrag bombs. And by the way, when you get a chance after the flyby today, go to the Southwest Pacific exhibit area in the pavilion. We have the model of a dirty door that's in the painting here. So take a look at that when we get done today. Kenney was ordered to Washington, D.C., and he leaves the day after the Bismarck Sea battle. When he meets with them, he says, I need more of these strafers. And of course, the European area was more of a priority, but he is still pleading. He did forward Gunn's engineering documents around January of 43 before he left. I need more of these things, but the North American engineers and some of the Air Force flyers are saying, you can't do that. Well, excuse me, but I just defeated the Japanese in the Battle of the Bismarck Sea, and it works. And it's because of the tactics that were taught by Pappy Gunn mostly, and of course the innovations with the nose gun and the parafrag implementation that got that done. It was a turning point in the Southwest Pacific War. Then Pappy Gunn is ordered to the U.S. He ends up in Dayton, Ohio first, and then on to Washington, D.C., but he brings with him a whole bunch of films that he has put together. He had nose guns, he had Bombay gun cameras, and rear-facing cameras, and he had a lot of film and photos, especially the ones from the Royce mission and the Bismarck Sea battle. Back to Dayton to talk with the Air Force Material Command on how to work all this stuff into the production process. And then he was out at North American advising them on the strafers, on what to do and how to build these things, and had a couple other ideas. One of them, it was attributed to him, but he actually didn't put it in place, was installing a 75 millimeter gun in the B-25. Well, that's the same caliber weapon that you put on a Sherman tank. You can imagine what it was like to fire that thing. Well, it was tested in around 1938 on a B-18 bomber, but they didn't go any farther with it, but they thought, well, let's put it in here anyways and make it work. So he advised on the G model and the H model. The G model was the earlier 75 millimeter cannon version. The H model was a lighter version of the guns. Hopefully that would help out with the action of the gun, the recoil of the weapon. But he also helped them build the B-25J models, and we have a J model here that I'll point out a few other things later on. So he helped implement what they would do with the J models. When he got back to Australia, he kind of went up, this is kind of a side story. He went up to the general and says, how do I get a pilot's wings like that. He said, well, just go to the base exchange and buy something. I said, well, I'm only a naval aviation pilot, from 1925. I've flown just about everything since December of 1941. I'll submit some paperwork. Well, they told him he had to go back to the U.S. and go to 9 months of school. I don't think so. So General Kenney contacted Arnold directly, and he got a senior pilot rating right away. His order was dated the 12th of June, 1943, and it was effective 7 December, 1941. Can you say back pay for pilots? Okay. This is the G model and the H model as deployed. You see on the left, the G model had two 50 caliber machine guns below or above the cannon. The H model had four 50 caliber machine guns in the nose, and it was the different version of the cannon. Now the one in the G model had to be manually loaded by the navigator, and they carried around 21 rounds on a rack, and he'd have to manually load it and take the spent case out and the whole works. The H model actually had an automatic feeding system, so you didn't need a navigator down there doing it. Pappy Gunn did test it in July of 1943 when some of the first deliveries came, and he loved it. In fact, he went out to test it, and lo and behold, he found a Japanese transport he could hit. And he got it. And he got another one. It was pretty effective, and he loved it. The only problem with this is that it rattled the airframe. It was hard to handle. When it fired, there were some comments from pilots that said that I felt like my plane stopped and then lurched forward after the recoil. But it popped rivets, filled the cockpits with smoke, and cordite smell. If you've ever smelled that before, it's kind of, you don't like that, you just don't want to be around it. But it was very loud. But eventually they took them out, on the, field modifications took them out. They weren't using them anymore. But the 1st Commando group in the China-Burma theater did use them in combat. And they were deployed to the Mediterranean, where they were used not very often. But they were, they ruined the structure of the aircraft, so they took them out. This is an assembly line at the North American factory after Pappy Gunn's visit. And they're adding more 50 caliber guns, and you can see this is a B-25J solid-nosed version. Doesn't have a bombardier in the nose, but it's got 8 guns in the nose. It's got package guns on each side. And this is far enough on the assembly line, it doesn't have the turret on top. So you've got 14 guns facing forward. They also developed the J model with the greenhouse canopy, like ours. And you can look, if you look on the port side and the starboard side of our aircraft, you can see the outline of where the package guns would have been. And they were on at one time. And also the plate, protection plates, the rivets are shown there. And you can see that on the port side and the starboard side. So that's 4 guns. You have 2 on the lower right. You have the bombardier gun, and then you have the turret gun. When turned around, you've got 2 guns pointing forward. This is what it looks like on the test range. That's 9 guns firing 750 to 850 rounds per minute at a target. Pretty effective. Okay, Pappy Gunn is kind of settled into a different job. He is ordered to get out of combat again, but he's appointed the maintenance officer for the 5th Air Force. And when convenient, of course, he goes on missions. He's got to test out his modifications, right? Well, he happens to find a Japanese ship out there, got to destroy it, right? Okay, well, he gets in a back and forth with Kenney quite a bit about these missions. But he still tells him, don't go out in the combat missions. I need you doing what you're doing, because you're helping to build up the forces here and keep them maintained. He does get out and test the new A-26 Douglas Invaders, which is dedicated to just as a gunship built by Douglas. Of course, making sure that he teaches tactics when he needs to. And also, he's making sure that all the aircraft are combat capable in the theater. Philippines liberation starts in October of 1944. He is assigned a special battalion mission to establish a support area at the Tacloban airfield on Leyte. He's going in when the 10th Corps goes in on the shore. Right about there, and he sets up during the initial landings. And of course, that's to support aircraft that are coming up from Australia into the theater in the Philippines, and then going north up into Luzon, and then coming back to the Leyte field, to Tacloban field. And this is a photo looking from the east to the west at the north end of the Tacloban airfield. It is a north-south 1836 compass heading field. So it's a very good airfield. The Japanese didn't use it too much, but it was available. But something came up later on the 24th of October when they were setting up. The USS Princeton got sunk in the water in the Leyte Gulf. There was no other aircraft carriers around. They had to land somewhere. Pappy Gunn gets out there with his flashlights, because there's no landing lights on the field. He gets out there with flashlights, taped the frying pans, and gets the signals out there to bring these planes in, to guide them in. And he saves a lot of aviators and a lot of planes. This is a close-up of the battle area, and this is the Tacloban airfield. You can see the angle on the airfield, and there's an aerial shot of the field that Pappy is working on to build up. And of course, you have the 10th Corps with the 1st Cav Division pushing the enemy to the west, along with the 24th Division here in the south of the area. The field's set up, it's operating, it's providing the support that's needed. And on the 30th of October, it's attacked. Japanese by air are attacking the airfield. Pappy Gunn is wounded very badly. He catches white phosphorus fragmentations in his upper shoulder, left shoulder, and his upper left arm. It's extremely painful, and he is sent to Australia. In the meantime, the Philippines liberation moves on. Manila is finally liberated. You can see the joy here in the tanks and taking over the Japanese, liberating the city. Also, you see the university is liberated as well. You can see the American flag there on the right. And they're pretty happy about getting liberated, and the Japanese are gone, and they're taken care of. And this is McArthur visiting the detainees. McArthur orders the 1st Cav Division to look and liberate the internment camp there at the university. They do find the family. They are safe, and it's the 3rd of February. They go after medical care. They're in pretty bad shape after being treated by the Japanese, especially the last year and a half. It was pretty bad. McArthur meets the family in person, and after they're taken care of on the 19th of February, they fly them to Brisbane to meet Pappy Gunn in the hospital. You can see his left arm is bandaged up all the way through his hand. And if you look real closely on his right hand, you see he only has the 3 fingers. That pinky was cut off a while back. So, but you see in the pictures that he just has the 3 fingers on his right hand. Post-World War II for him and his wife, they make it back to the States, and they actually do some touring of some of the air bases and also some of the factories. He's promoted to colonel, full colonel. He retires late in 1948. He has a full disability retirement. He's had multiple surgeries to take care of his condition. He does have permanent nerve damage, but he's able to fly later on a limited basis. As a civilian, he returns and re-engages with the Philippine Airlines, and he leaves Philippine Airlines. He established his own company called the Philippine Aviation Development Incorporated in 1950 with his son Nathaniel, who was about 20 years old at that time. They have 10 aircraft by 1957. They're serving Manila, Cebu, and the Davao area on Mindanao. They also have a contract with the U.S. military servicing anything in the Southeast Asia region. And also he advises the Philippine Air Force on the buildup post-World War II. This is a summary of what Pappy was like during the war and his character. And this is by John Bruning, who's an author of Indestructible, actually posted this online. Quote, Pappy Gunn embodied the best of the American spirit, a refusal to quit no matter what the odds, a can-do attitude, a disregard for red tape, and I should underline that, a refusal to accept failure, underline that one too, and a disdain for unnecessary and hindering bureaucracy, big underline for that. He burned with a desire to win at all costs. Very dedicated individual. Then, the end. On the night of October 11, 1957, Paul Irvin Pappy Gunn was flying a Beech 18 in the central Philippines. A sudden downforce slammed his low-flying aircraft into the ground. Props damaged, fuselage and wings torn up. The Beech was probably doomed right then. But Pappy Gunn, with over 20,000 flight hours, somehow managed to firewall the throttles, gain a bit of altitude, and start to turn for the nearest airfield. If he only had a few more feet of altitude, he might have made it. Instead, he struck a tree, and the Beech crashed with the loss of everyone on board. Rest in peace, Colonel. In Pappy's own words, "I'll die before I'm 60 with my boots on and the throttle rammed to the firewall." And that's what happened. This is his headstone, and he's buried at the Pensacola National Cemetery in Florida. Polly is with him, but if you look on the headstone, it says Colonel, United States Air Force, World War I and World War II, and his date of birth and date of passing. There's no references to him being in the Navy on his headstone, which I find kind of interesting.